Hello, this is Lenny Vermoss, and this is a video about making a cube puzzle. The resources are at the bit.ly Lenny V Cube Puzzle, which includes a student sheet, a link to the video, and several more resources. But basically, the cube puzzle is students will create a puzzle made of 27 individual wood chips by gluing them together. And I'm just going to run through a little bit how I introduce this to students and how this works. So basically, we're going to start with 27 little individual cubes, and we're going to make them into a 3 by 3 by 3 cube by creating the pieces that you see at the right. I like to start with this with the students. So I show them this picture and say, can you turn this into this from this? And then I like these questions, so we're going to start with this and then ask them to share what did they notice and what do they wonder. So giving them a little time to look at those pictures and talk. They will usually come up with some of the things that I want to talk about with the cube. For example, how many cubes it will take, the number of pieces, some of the shapes like that. And so it creates a interest on the part of the students. In the resources, there is where I originally found this unit was kind of starting with a company that had extra wood pieces and they wanted to sell them or make them into puzzles and kind of developing that. But I found when I tried that with my grandkids that they lost interest pretty quick, and so I've used this hook to kind of start and then just jump right into making the cubes. And so I start with some what mathematicians use and call these the shapes, and we'll then kind of go from there to talk about how you can create the cube, which is what the next part of the video will show. And then I'll follow it up with some more teacher hints after that. As we're getting ready to begin construction, I want to identify the vocabulary that mathematicians would use for a cube as we build it. So mathematicians call this flat side a face. These are edges, and then the points here would be vertexes. Okay, I'm going to give some hints about gluing this together so you have a little bit of luck. The one thing I might advise doing is keeping the kind of the grain of the wood going the same direction. So I'm going to do a 5-piece, and so I have the 5 pieces here. And one thing you want to make sure of is when you glue this, you're going to want something to fit in here. So make sure that you leave enough space here so that when the puzzle goes together, that piece will fit in. For gluing, we've tried a couple things. One thing we tried was Q-tips. We found that Q-tips work pretty good at first, but then you get a little bit of string from the Q-tip. So we're going to actually use a little ketchup container and a toothpick. And then what you want to do is, I'm doing it on a piece of paper so we don't get glue on the table. But I'm going to want to put a glue on this face right here, so I'm going to put some glue right here. It doesn't take a lot of glue, but you want to make sure that you have the glue and so that it doesn't squirt out or stick out when you put it together. So we're going to glue it together and we're going to push it together like that. Okay? And then we're going to go ahead and glue the rest of these pieces together to form this first 5-piece that I have. Okay, so we're ready for our second piece. This is a 5-piece that I've glued together, and it's glued together, and I set it on the paper so I don't get glue on the table. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to do this is going to be a 6-piece. Remember, we want 27 cubes all together. So that means I'm going to have 3 5-pieces and 2 6-pieces. So I'm going to do a 6-piece. And once again, I wanted to make sure that I had enough space for this cube to fit in here. So make sure that when you glue that, those 2 are wide enough. If you have one, and you can decide what you want your pieces to look like. But this is what I'm going to do my next piece. So my next gluing will be to put these pieces, these 6 pieces together. And just a little bit of a gluing hint, when you go to glue, I'm going to put these two faces together. So I twirl my toothpick just a little bit to keep the glue on it. And then what I do is I put a little bit of glue on the face. You don't want too much, so that when you squeeze these together, the glue sticks, but that it doesn't come out past the side. So I'm going to go like that. If you do get a little that goes out, you can just wipe it off with your finger. And then I'll continue to glue these other, so I get my 6-piece here together. Okay, here's my next 6-piece. And again, if you make one that has a U shape like this, a space, you want to make sure that when you make this one, you leave enough room for that cube to go in there, all right? My next piece is going to be this one right here that I'm going to glue together. And again, we're just continuing to build it so that we want to make sure all the pieces are going to fit together. So I left a little bit of space here, so if I would have some glue that's sticking out, the 2 pieces don't stick together. So leave a little bit of space there. And my next one that I'm going to do is going to be this one, which goes right here. We are going to switch to a Q-tip and show you a Q-tip, because Q-tip might be not quite as messy and a little easier to spread. Okay, this particular cube is going to have 2 faces to glue on, and so again I'm using the Q-tip. So as I put the Q-tip, you can start to see how the Q-tip starts to maybe get a little runny, so you can decide if you want to use a Q-tip. But this one had 2 faces that go together, so I glued both face and hold it together. And this one is just going to fit right up here. Okay, here's my next piece, and you can see how I've laid it in there. This is a 6-piece. It's a little tricky because what's going to happen is that this cube right here is over the top, and so to glue this one, I'm actually going to move it, and it's going to glue like this right here. So when I get this glued together, this is a piece, and then it's going to fit right up in there. And again, as I'm letting this dry, leave these a little bit of space in there so the pieces don't get stuck together. Okay, so this is my 6th piece that's going to go in here. I had a couple pieces in here that had 2 faces that I put glue on, but again, I laid it here so that I could put this piece, which is going to fit over the top of this. And so I've let this dry a little bit, so I'm just very carefully going to put this up here, and again leaving it a little bit of space so it has room to go. And then what I'm going to do is my last piece is going to be this one over here, and again I'm just going to glue it just like this. So this will be my last piece, which is going to go right in here. Okay, so here's my last 5 piece, and again I've let this dry a little bit, so again you want to, I'm just very carefully going to show up. So what I have here now is I have my 3x3x3 cube. And I'm just very carefully going to pull the pieces apart so you can see how it's constructed. So you'll find that once you pull it apart and then trying to get it together isn't as easy as what it looks like, especially when you move all the pieces around. But I'm just going to slide it back together here to show what it looks like. So there's my 3x3 cube. Once you get it this way, you'll want to let it dry pretty good, and that's your next task, is going to be making a box out of a net for it. So that's what we're going to work on next, and we'll just let this dry. Okay, here's the finished product, and wax paper might work a little bit better to glue it on because the won't absorb like the paper. But one thing I want to point out, and I'm just going to pull it apart so I can get it back together. But when you build this, what you'll end up with is you'll end up with 3 5-piece ones and 2 6-piece ones to get your 27 cubes. But there's lots of different ways you can do this. This was just one way I built it to kind of demonstrate a couple different things, but you can start out any way you want. But again, you want to make sure as you're building it, it falls into 3 by 3 and then by 3 high. All right, so and I'm having trouble getting it together just like this. So it's 3 high. Now, the next thing that you're going to do is to make a container for your cube. And I've chosen to give you a net that will fold up, but just a couple hints. After you cut it out, what you want to do is you want to go through and fold on each of the lines. If you fold with the dark on the inside, then when you put it together into your box, you won't have any lines on the outside. You can decorate it or put whatever you want on the outside. It's probably better to do that while it's flat. But the tabs, if you go through, you want to fold all of these in beforehand so it's ready to fold. And then basically what you do is you just get some glue and you fold it and glue it so that it fits together into a little box. And then you can put your cube, then you'll have a box to put your cube inside of. Okay, just a couple other finishing up deals for teachers. This is the glue. I just used a wood glue. I think it would probably be better than Elmer's since you have wood. The cubes I got on Amazon. And then here's the toothpick I use, and you can see if you want to use a toothpick or a Q-tip, and it doesn't take very much glue at all in the bottom to be able to glue these together. Okay, a couple of finishing hints. I talked a little bit about the wax paper, and thinking about it, I think the wax paper works well because when the glue wouldn't stick to it. And then I just want to talk a little bit about the cubes. These are some inexpensive cubes that my wife Charlotte found. You can find some that are fairly inexpensive. The more inexpensive, probably the lower quality that you have. So you have to be careful when you're putting them together if you have a space that you leave space so that they'll fit together as they're building them. So you can look around and see what you can find. Here are a few more ideas and extensions for the cube puzzle. First one, this is a part of the student sheet where they have a notes where they can record some vocabulary, as well as I like them to fill in how many cubes they have, and then to have that they'll come up with 3 sets of 5 cubes and 2 sets of 6 cubes. Another, which I found challenging, some of the 5th graders that I worked with had to draw their 5 pieces on isometric paper. And so I have provided in the student materials some isometric paper and some hints for drawing this. But I was surprised, but I think it's also, you see a little bit about how difficult it is. And another thing I did was even just to show students how to draw a single cube on a blank piece of paper in 3 dimensions, because it's a little bit difficult to do. The other one that I talked about in the video was to cut out and decorate a net to make a box for your puzzle. In the One Materials, they use this as kind of an advertising ploy. So they name their puzzle and then they market it. I chose in what I've done, just because of limited time, is to just give them a net, have them cut it out, and then glue it together and decorate it. But you could extend that how you wanted. So here's a picture of the net that you get to put in, and here's a net. I talk a little bit about a net and that a net folds up. Here is a net for a dodecahedron. And I also have an activity on my website of actually creating a dodecahedron. I used it for kind of a Christmas ornament, but you could use it for whatever you wanted. And then pose a question, and again, depending on time, you could make this more open-ended or closed. Is there more than one way for a net for a cube to be drawn? And the link there kind of provides you with a way to be able to look at some. And the very open-ended way is that you just ask students, you give them the 6 square faces and say, how many ways can you arrange those And then the next step is to see if those would fold up into a cube. Some of them will and some of them won't. This is a little bit more fixed, but you could give them some shapes and then ask them if these would fold up into, if these nets would fold up into a cube. And so there's some of them there. And then here's some incorrect ones that would also not fold up into a cube, and see what they have in common. So you can, if you'd like to, you can use either of those. Another extension that you might do is talking about the Platonic solids. And so looking at the Platonic solids and identifying, there's 5 of them: a cube, a tetrahedron, an octagon, a dodecahedron, and an icosahedron. And these shapes are on the PowerPoint that you have. But then you might want to have them look at Euler's formula. So here is just a kind of an open-ended where they put in the faces of vertices and edges. And then the next slide gives the Euler's formula. But it's also important to show students that this works for any three-dimensional geometric solid. So it doesn't have to be the Platonic solid, so anyone. So you could give them some dice and have them investigate and see if that works. And so here are some more information about that. So hopefully this will be something that you use. If you have any questions, my email address and website are on the first slide, but hope you find something that will work with your students.